Welcome to Essential Coaching Conversations with Kyle and Asim.
The real, relevant, necessary conversations to help you navigate coaching, teaching, learning, and life.
Happy birthday, Kyle.
Happy birthday, my man.
4 years of essential coaching, obviously less for the podcast, but on this day, April 15th, round about this time at night, I think too, we had our first essential coaching calls with our original, our OG folks from all over the world as the world was shut down for the COVID-19 pandemic. We were a month into that. And in that month, we presented on that worldwide online coaching clinic.
Yep.
Got a bunch of these people that watched us for whatever reason. I don't know why. As two of the least famous people on that coaching clinic. And they all signed up for this thing called essential coaching. And here we are 4 years later at 10 o'clock at night on a Monday, recording an episode talking about 4 years of pivoting and pivoting and pivoting some more and still being around, impacting, spreading the good word, and trying to create that exponential generational change.
Yeah, happy birthday, my guy. I think the first shout out should go to Layson Perkins.
Heck yeah.
For giving us a shot on that worldwide coaching clinic thing. And again, nobody had anything to do. That's why somebody like us would get picked up and downloaded and watched. But we unmistakably have the feather in our cap of being the least famous people that were associated with that thing. But we got a chance to present individually. We got a chance to present jointly. Some of these ideas were starting to come together, and of course, we're sitting around going, "Okay, how do we stay involved in coaching?" I had just gotten out of coaching at the time and was just teaching and was looking for a way to sort of scratch that itch, if you were. And we had this idea, and a lot of these conversations late at night on like, okay, what would something like this look like? What's sort of our mission statement? What's our vision? And then this brand just sort of develops into essential coaching, empowering coaches, and this mission statement of, creating exponential generational change and the next connection. And what is this thing called the human component? And what would this pyramid pathway look like? And us just reflecting on all of our struggles and failures as coaches and teachers and leaders. And, again, as it had gotten let go, you had gotten let go, that catalyzed our relationship. And just the frustrations, I think, of trying to develop. We were two hungry guys trying to get better and trying to figure out a world in which we could sort of, not just survive in, but thrive in. And we thought we were good coaches. We knew we were good people. We were trying to do the right thing, and things weren't really working out for us. And we were kind of following, doing the same old thing that everybody else was doing, trying to keep up with the Joneses, and just sort of realized that like maybe there's got to be a different way. And we, if we've done anything over the last 4 years, I think is dare to ask the question, well, is there another way? And maybe not even a better way, just another way. Like if I'm going to keep banging my head against the wall doing the same thing over and over again, like maybe there's something else. And
maybe there's a different spot on the wall that's a little more comfortable, or
yeah, exactly.
a little bit
and
farther,
it may not work for everybody, but like maybe it'll work for us. And then just trying to engage somebody in a conversation, and really cool that, I think on that first day we had 2 calls with 2 separate groups. And I think we've talked about and kind of joked about this before, but it was on like a Google Meet, and it was a disaster, and we couldn't get it figured out. And luckily for us, like everybody still came back and started with about 3 dozen coaches on those initial calls. And some people, trickled off, and some people jumped in, and eventually led to the Tuesday night group and the Thursday night group. And happy to still say, I mean, we've got a Thursday night group chat that's still thriving, right now. Shout out to those guys. But individual text conversations, WhatsApp, Slack. I mean, there are tons of different mediums that we've been able to connect with and do this. And I think it's, the you hear a lot of people in business and sport and life talk about, the number one thing you got to do is keep showing up. Just keep showing up. Keep trying to keep showing up. Just
Mhm.
regardless of what's going on, keep showing up, and eventually you'll kind of break through. And I think in some instances we can argue we've done that. We've broken through. And consistently speaking, tonight was volume 194 of the EC
Hmm.
Rocket Chat. And, maybe poetically enough, the last few chats have been a series on consistency.
Mhm.
And, going back to some of my favorite moments that we had on those Thursday night Zoom calls with Bubba and John and Layden and Adrian, and talking about, you know, what is consistency, what is character, developing that definition of character being the consistency of positive habits, and stories like heat the cheese and cheese be cold, and phrases and things like that that are sort of birthed out of just these organic conversations. It's really cool to see that continually showing up, 4 years later,
Right.
and 194 volumes of a chat. We're 70, 75 or so episodes of a podcast in, and who the heck knows what's going to be next. But I think it's really cool to take a moment to reflect on the last 4 years, and just, two guys trying to figure out how to get on a Google Meet. Now we're, sitting here, kind of rocking and rolling in a podcast that's been heard in 49 or 48 states and 48 countries. And, we got a chance to message with Moses from, who's in Kenya, and Yusuf, who's in Estonia, who are two of our original international members. And it's just cool. I don't really know a better way to put it, but cool. Um, and here's to the next connection, man.
Yeah. I mean, I cool is something that I'm not sure when I was like in high school, right? I would have thought as a 36-year-old person now, man, it would be cool to like know people in all these different countries because of basketball. I was pissed I didn't make the high school basketball team, right? Like, look how far this little orange ball, right? Because that was the impetus for all of it was basketball. But it's transformed into so much more than that. And that was what I think is the cool part, right? Sharing life with you, sharing life with some of our OGs that we've had the pleasure of knowing for 4 years, and we've had, babies been born in a lot of those people's lives. We've had people get married, adopting kids, houses, failure,
Fired.
successes, getting fired, right? Like all kinds of different
New
stuff,
jobs,
new jobs. I mean, it's
switching
and
careers.
absolutely, right. And so, like, how we always talk about like the things that coaches say to get the job versus the things that help them keep the job.
Mm-hmm.
And like what we all say is important, right? So we want to help people become better, better daughters, husbands, wives, sons, all that stuff, right? Well, we've gotten to do that on a large scale with our EC fam. And we're not like claiming credit for any of that stuff, but it's just been cool to share life with those people. And, for whatever small part of us that has impacted them positively, a lot of them keep coming back to have conversations, and they'll pick up the phone and they'll respond to a text, and like, you send your Monday DMs to all these people and like they respond to you. And that to me, like that making that next connection, it's that fulfilling piece of like, we may not have a direct influence on them every single day, but we do get to share things with them every single day. And we do get to be a part of their experiences every single day. Um, I live honestly, like one of my favorite things is seeing that Thursday night group chat blow up, and we're talking about something, right? And like I think that chat has made me a better man. right? Hearing Bubba's stories, hearing Layden's stories, and like we're all very different. We're all in different parts of the country, and we all maybe have different beliefs and all that stuff. But the one commonality that keeps bringing us back together is that we're trying to do this thing better. And to know that we've had that for 4 years with those guys, I mean, that's like, right? That's a full recruiting class at a job, right? At a college job or a prep school job or whatever, where you're recruiting people for 4, 5, 6 years, right? And we get to share successes and failures together. I mean, that's been like, I don't know, the coolest thing to me, at least, beyond like the actual work of putting this stuff together and having these conversations and like, you know, organizing and optimizing and doing all the things that we do that we'll get into here in a minute. But, the human component truly is undefeated. And I will go to my grave with that, right? The human component is 100% undefeated. And I feel really grateful to have 4 years of, in times of, and you can probably attest to this too, in times of great change and in times of like sort of uncertainty, the one thing that I could always count on for these last 4 years at least is EC and what we do and the conversations that we have, and knowing that there's something that sort of grounds you in that work and in that thought process.
I think having the comfort of knowing that that's there has been huge. And again, just for me personally, 4 years ago, getting out of coaching, just teaching, getting out of teaching, transitioning into a new job, and then even in the last year and a half, transitioning into another new job. It's been a lot of newness. It's been a lot of uncertainty. It's been a lot of, you know, nervousness and what the next decision is going to be, and not knowing what that next decision is going to bring. And that's been a huge comfort in knowing that there's a group that you can go, hey guys, I'm thinking about giving up the one thing I know, the one thing that I think I'm pretty good at. I'm thinking about kind of giving that up and going into something that's completely new. How crazy is this? What do you guys think? Just having a group that you can feel, kind of safe and comfortable in throwing something like that out there. And all the way from really massive life changing decisions down to, hey, I'm thinking about trying this new coffee recipe. Hey, I'm thinking about baking cookies this way. I'm thinking about grilling this way. Like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this to my house, and just having, a group of support that you can kind of chop up everyday things with, whether they're on a really massive, like heavy, large scale thing, or just down to the things that you're interested in. And, neat just kind of seeing all these different things in life from people who would have never crossed paths, never been in a room together. And now you feel like you've known them forever, and you consider them dang near family in a lot of ways. And getting, I mean, you and I've gotten a chance to meet some of these people, in our travels and things like that. And again, just really, really cool. And again, don't know what the next 4 years will bring, but excited about it. And we can jump into a little bit of that here in a little bit, but I'll be remiss if we didn't get our athlete shout outs in.
Dude, I forgot about that. We launched right into it.
Well, we had to go right into the birthday because that was the topic. Like, that was the topic du jour, right?
Yeah, that's actually.
Um, but I will, because I wanted to, the reason why I wanted to make sure we did this tonight was because you basically told us it was going to be Barry Sanders
I did, yeah.
last week. Like you said, don't even ask me next week. We already know it's going to be number 20, Hall of Fame elite tag guy.
Mm,
Um, and then before we started recording, you told me you forgot about that
I
and you were
did.
going to go with somebody else.
I did.
So I want to make sure, really, for my own curiosity, kind of take a time out and a break in the action, because I got to know who your number 20 is.
So Barry Sanders, obviously, um, you know, clearly the greatest tag player of all time, phone booth guy.
Phone
Um,
booth guy.
so I had written down Allen Houston, right? New York Knicks, amazing career. I think he actually gets overshadowed by all the other great players from the 90s, and like he was awesome. especially in NBA Jam, right? Shout out to one of the greatest video games ever made. Um, Used to play as him and who else was, I don't even remember who else was on the team. I just get buckets with Allen Houston. But anyway, so I wrote him down, but he's the honorable mention today, obviously, because it is the Barry Sanders episode. You can't have an episode 20 without it being Barry Sanders. Like, that's crazy. But Allen Houston was the name that I wrote down.
I
I don't
had
know if that
no
was
idea.
anticlimactic for you. I don't know if it was or not, but
I had no idea who it was going to be because it can't be better than Barry Sanders. So
yeah,
I was very
sure.
curious who made you forget about.
Allen Houston. And you know what? I think this was Inception because I saw a video of him dunking on somebody the other day on Twitter. Um,
Uh,
Probably like 3, 4 days ago. I don't know. Maybe did he dunk on Michael Jordan? I don't know who it was, but he comes on the baseline and just like slams it over somebody. And I guess for whatever reason that clicked in my brain. Social media researchers out there, you can figure out that phenomena for us. But I think it was inceptioned to me that it needed to be Allen Houston for this episode.
no, that makes sense. So I've got one, and we'll sort of jointly share Barry Sanders because again, how do you not? So my number 20, I'm going back to Dallas, but I'm going the hockey route, and I'm going back to the 1999 Stanley Cup Championship. Ed Belfour, goalkeeper,
Okay.
goaltender, who I remember watching. I'd like just gotten a TV in my room as a like, I'm like a 1999 eighth grade freshman. I'd gotten a TV in my room, and I remember watching that. I just started learning like getting into hockey, probably like 96, 97. So a couple of years into that, I'd been to a couple of Dallas Stars game. My dad took us, went to the family, went to a couple of games, starting to get into hockey. And Belfour was the goalie. Mike Madonna's got a statue now out there. So, Dallas fan, Stars fan, all that. And I remember watching game 6 of the Stanley Cup finals. It was triple overtime. I had school the next morning, and I was up till like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever it was. And Belfour was going against one of my other favorite goaltenders at the time. They're playing the Buffalo Sabres and Dominic Hasek, and they won 2-1 in triple overtime to win. And Belfour and Hasek each had like 50 saves in that game, and it was absolutely unreal. And I remember watching that, and that was sort of like I was already getting into hockey, but that like kind of sold me on it. And then they went to a couple of conference finals. They went back to the Stanley Western finals the next year. And so anyway, when I think back to my falling in love with hockey days in Dallas, number 20, Ed Belfour.
All right. All right. I'm with it. I'm with it. I like when you go the hockey route. The 90s baseball route is kind of your lane, but like I'm
Mm-hmm.
a fan when you go the hockey route. You know, what number did Mike Madonna wear?
9.
9. You did. You used him, right?
I'm pretty sure he was my number 9.
Pretty
Yeah.
sure he was your number 9. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, the fact that we're at 20 episodes for season 2 is a little wild to me.
Yeah.
It seems like that's gone really fast. Just like these last 4 years have gone really fast. Back to the topic du jour. Well,
Yep.
actually, no, we have a would you rather as well.
Yeah. Why don't you introduce that?
Yeah. So this one it's an interesting one, and I think it is actually very timely with the transfer portal and all of this stuff. So you and I were talking the other day, and we threw around this idea of the would you rather. Would you rather, and coaches, of course, play along at home. Would you rather sign and rely on the transfer that you've been recruiting for maybe 45 days in the transfer portal, usually far less than that, or take the incoming freshman with whom you have a relationship, perhaps over like 2 or 3 years of recruiting that player? And we leave it open ended at that. I don't think we need to specify any more than that. But those are sort of the two options.
Yeah.
The fleeting, quick relationship with the transfer who, potentially is a proven commodity depending on how you look at their film and things like that, or the incoming freshman with whom you have a relationship of maybe 2 or 3 years, depending on how long you've been recruiting them, that is perhaps unproven at your level, or you don't know whether they're going to work out or not?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised at my answer here, but I'm gonna take the shorter relationship with the more older, mature, proven commodity.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that I want to say that, but I'm sort of adapting to the times and the business nature of what division or college athletics is in general nowadays. And most coaches don't have the time or the benefit of the doubt to recruit somebody 2 or 3 years and then hope that they're going to be good. And I would rather take for a couple of reasons. A, I've got more playing data on you at a more comparable level.
Hmm.
B, I'll plan on taking the more mature, generalizing, but probably the more older, more mature player. C, I'm also banking on the fact that A, you've been through this process before and you're not really into the glitz and the glamour and the photo shoots and the you've already kind of gone through that route. And I do think this is an untold side of all of this, but there's a certain level of anxiety of kids having to go through this process a second time because you've already gotten married once and you think you're only going to do it one time. And here all of a sudden you are jumping into the portal and the uncertainty, and maybe you're having to move further away from home. And I think there's a certain level of that athletes have to go through that's a little bit um, undervalued. And then four, you know, I'll kind of rely on my ability to connect with people and build relationships deeply quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And that if I can, 2 weeks of, you know, connection and human component with me is going to be deeper and more meaningful than 6 months with somebody else, right? That's kind of what I'm hedging my bets on my ability to get to know you, to build a relationship, and so on and so forth as quickly as I possibly can, and hedging my bets on the fact that a more mature player who's been through this will understand that and probably be willing to sort of tango that way, if you will. And then, if I can have my 2021 year old playing against your 18-year-old, there's just going to be certain inherent advantages with being a little older, stronger, wiser, maybe been here, done that. So I'm kind of surprised that that's my answer, but I think maybe being on this side of things the last couple of years has kind of helped me see that a little bit. And I definitely think it's both of them are gambles, both of them are a bit of a risk. But I also just don't know if you have the benefit of the time anymore. And if you're gonna sort of take a gamble, I think you got to take a gamble on what you do know, and what you do know is kind of maybe what you've been able to see from the players actually on the playing surface. So that would be mine. I'm hoping you'll be the opposite, just for good radio here.
I mean, you bring up a lot of good points, right? And I think the one trend that we've seen is that older teams tend to win more because they have more physically developed kids,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps even more mentally developed, and they've seen more of the game and they've played it at a higher level, the pace and physicality and all of that stuff. But somebody still needs to sign freshmen. Otherwise, all the transfers dry up. So I'm going to go with the opposite, that I would like to think if we've built that relationship over several, even 6 months to a year, whatever it is, that I am a good enough coach and a good enough recruiter to vet your maturity level. And the more time that we spend together, the more questions that we're able to ask each other, the more we're able to connect. I think, again, this is all speculation, right? I think that it's not going to be just anybody that we've spent 2 years recruiting. It's going to be the right people. It's going to be the right person who then, as they get here and they get older and they're exposed to the way that we do things, their skill acquisition will be rapid enough to where, yeah, what we have in shortcomings to your 21-year-old, they perhaps don't have the extra baggage of transferring and all the other stuff that comes with that too. Now, I would also like to just have an older team that is over themselves, right? And you don't have to go through a lot of the growing pains that you do with, freshmen or whatever, right?
Yeah.
You also, I mean, listen, like I said earlier, somebody has to sign the freshman, and I would rather be that person and help them over 4 years than also try to help, a 21-year-old person unlearn all the bad habits and shit that they learn from other people. Right. So we talk a lot about unlearning, right? Shout out to one of our EC fam from afar, Kip. And he talks about unlearning all the time. But I think also as kids get older and like as we all get older, there's a lot more habits that die harder. And so I think you have to wade through some of that. Whereas if you have a kid who comes in at 18, not knowing what they don't know, perhaps it is easier to break down those walls a little bit more than it is when they're 21, 22 years old and in the twilight of their career. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No,
I don't know
I
if
think
there's an easy answer.
that's a,
Easy answer to that.
it's a pretty, well, again, everything's a risk, right? So you're just kind of, what are you willing to roll the dice with?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, 4 years ago, I think my answer would have been, or even 2 years ago, I think my answer would have been more in line with yours. And maybe 2 or 3 years from now, I think things
Mm-hmm.
ebb and flow. We're almost out of this COVID extra year cycle mess.
Yeah, it's after this coming season, right?
Right.
24-25. Yeah.
And who knows what's going to happen with transfer portals and this and that. I mean, all this stuff is obviously pretty fluid and could change with
Mm-hmm.
NIL and et cetera. And there's still more legislation to be had. And but it's all trending towards opening this up even
Mm-hmm.
more in line with like a free agent market and kind of wild west. So some of those answers are going to be a little bit more contingent on, am I John Calipari and I've got $5 million in chicken money that's going to be at
Right.
my disposal,
Right. Right.
or am I a D2 school or a low D1 and I've got a bank on, trying to build that. And then obviously there's going to be questions about your administration. They're going to give you 2 or 3 years to develop freshmen and blah, blah, blah. So obviously very contextually heavy, but yeah, I think it's a great question, a pretty good debate. And I think we, pretty great points on either side of that particular argument. But I mean, all this stuff, it's eventually going to trickle down, man. I mean, you wait till Florida, Texas, Georgia, California, they're going to lead the charge in some ways, where you're going to have some of this open season,
Mm-hmm.
transfer portal open, free agency kind of stuff all the way down to high school.
Trade
And
trade deadlines in Division I college football.
yeah, and it, everything sort of points towards going that way. And I think the other, maybe one last point I would put up is, even really great kids who love you and do that, they still get really bad advice from adults.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they don't want to leave, even if they do want to play for you, even if they do want to do this and that, they only get so much of that decision. Say
Mm-hmm.
so. They're still getting advice from parents, from trainers, from AAU coaches, from all these different things. And, again, it's hard to say, hey, I believe and I love our relationship, but hey, they're offering me this over here. I gotta roll the dice with that. And that's where somebody on your side of the fence, you've got to keep recruiting that kid, because you're
Right.
recruiting them for the backslide. You're recruiting them for the second time around. Go over there, chase your bag, have your fun, sit on the bench, whatever, but we'll be here the next time around. And it might be that you eventually win with that same kid, but it might be the second time around that you end up getting them. And you're hoping that legwork previously, is enough to maybe get them back. But I mean, those are real stories and situations that are happening all over the place. If you're a college coach, you've got to go out and recruit kids that you previously probably never would have had a chance to get, because you're sort of banking on the fact that's not their last stop. And if
Mm-hmm.
I can develop a relationship with them now and they can go to a Power 5, they might slide back down to me, or they're a Division I kid and I'm at D2 or D3. I'm gonna go after that D1 kid. And the moment that they don't, pan out or whatever, maybe they get injured or something like that and they don't want to wait around, all of those things get flushed back out. Cause like you said, high school kids have to get signed too. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get signed where they want to go at the Division 1 level. And then all of these places have spots up for grabs. And there's a lot of quote unquote Division 1 players who can't get back into D1 because they're stuck in that portal. And that's why I think you're seeing so much parity. D2s are beating D1s, D3s have beaten D1s on the
Mm-hmm.
men's and women's side in these preseason exhibition games and stuff because there's D1 players literally all over the country, everywhere you go. And I also think that's just a testament to the game evolving and that kind of things too. But maybe that's a conversation for another day. So enough of that. Let's talk more about our birthday.
Yeah, no, I listen, we could talk about transferring and levels and all that stuff ad nauseum. Go People want to hear about levels, go back and listen to what was it, episode 5, the levels myth. Go back and listen to that and enjoy that. But yeah, let's talk about our birthday a little bit. And you and I were sort of throwing around how we wanted to attack this episode as far as like, did we want it to be what we've learned over just this last year or over the last 4 years, and kind of reflecting on that and sort of going through that rocket process with that. Um, I think this year in particular has been one of tremendous transition for the both of us. Um, and I just, when we talk about lessons learned, and you brought up a really good point. I'm going to let you talk about sort of the business model and all of that stuff. I'm just going to start out by saying the one lesson that sticks out above all, and we knew that this was the case, but the one lesson that sticks out above all of them is that the human component is truly undefeated. But not the version of the human component that, and we have not done this episode, but we've talked about doing this, about what the human component actually means. And I think that there's this misconception out there, and I know I ran into this buzzsaw, and we can talk about that at a later date as well, but thinking that the human component somehow means that, you're soft or not holding kids accountable or holding parents accountable or other adults to what we're trying to do. I think it's actually quite the opposite, that the relationships that you have and the standards that we have and the way that we talk about things, the way that we measure things, the way that decisions get made, all of those things deal with the recruiting relationships that we have, and that there is an authenticity. Like, I think the authenticity part is often overlooked in the fear that like that's going to drive people away. And I just think if the more authentic you are and the more honest you are about how things work, the more you're going to have people on the bus that can handle those things. And over the course of this last year, really over the course of my entire career doing this, but definitely over this last year, in the recruiting relationships and like signing players and all of that stuff, right? Prioritizing the human component and like the honesty and the transparency, and that, like, those things build trust, and the consistency of acting within the human component wheel every day with all of those people. I'll say there's a lot of people out there that don't like that. They don't want you to be honest with them. They just want you to tell them what they want to hear. And I just think that we as coaches and we as essential coaching and our OGs, like, I think we're continually challenged to try to communicate with people who have no interest in being communicated with in that way. So lesson learned over the year, like, we have to do a better job, I think, of defining what the human component actually is and how it manifests itself in literally everything we do. Because sometimes it's hard to see it when people are upset or whatever, but we can always go back to, were we authentic with you? Was there communication? Was it consistent? All of those things. You may not like what it is, but that doesn't mean it wasn't there. And I'll throw it to you because I think this is part of what you were going to say about you know folks doing the work and all of that. I'm not going to say too much about it because you will say it much better than I can. But I think what I have just said about the human component being undefeated and how to define what it is, that is the work that we're talking about in part. So I'll throw it to you for that piece of the observation for the last year, 4 years.
Yeah, I think what I've been reflecting on is, if you would have asked us, like, all right, we're going to start this little project of ours, and, where do we see it in 4 years? Did we see 194 volumes of a chat? Did we see 75 episodes of a podcast? Did we see, text, all those kinds of things? And quite honestly, like, I thought, part of our hope was, hey, we want to get out of the classroom. I won't teach anymore. I probably view myself as either still coaching or being around it. But, you know, part of starting a business is to support yourself on it, right? You want to make money while you do it. And this might be extreme moment of honesty or vulnerability or whatever this is, but I will say the thing that I have learned reflecting over the last 4 years is the way that we have set this up, and we have set this up very intentionally, right? So don't think like this is a mistake or anything like that, but sort of the realization is that the way we have decided to conduct Essential Coaching LLC, it is a bad business model. Just being honest. It is a bad way to try to make $1 million. This is not, if this was a way, if the goal of this was to make $1 million and never have to work again, then we essentially set this up in the wrong way, right? But the way this was done was very intentional. And we wanted to try something different. Everybody else is trying to do something quick. Everybody else is searching for something that's going to instantly rocket their career or fix all of their problems or whatever. And I can tell you right now, we have not made $1 million.
We
No
have not.
shame in that. No shame in that game. The way we have decided to go about this is not a great business model in those terms. And there's two reasons why I think that is. Number one, people don't want to do the work. Number two, people don't want to pay to then do their own work. People are willing to pay. That exists. People are willing to pay for convenience. People are willing to pay for things that are going to happen quickly for them. People are willing to pay for the mystique or the perception of progress, the perception of development. People are willing to pay for things that they see other people doing. But people are not willing, biggest lesson I've learned, they are not willing to pay to have to do the work that is necessary. And it's not to say that we're not working with you, but what makes us different is that this entire process is about self-reflection. It's about asking questions, and it is about a lifelong journey to where you have to ask difficult questions of yourself, search, take the time, and try to dive into those things. And none of that is going to happen quickly. There is no instant gratification in a more like stoic journey.
Mm-hmm.
It is going to be difficult. It is going to take time. And for you and I, it has worked. For the people that we have done work with, it has worked for the most part, I would argue. And I think they would as well. But this is not a instant fix. You're willing to pay for the PDF, you're willing to pay for the DVD, you're willing to drive to the clinic, and there's value in those certain things. Again, not to say that you shouldn't do that stuff. There is value there. But it's not just the hoarding and collecting of information that's going to make you better. It's what you're doing with that. It's the reflective process that happens along that journey of learning new things and collecting new information. If that stuff doesn't align with what your overall vision is, or you don't have a vision to begin with, because you haven't taken the time to develop it and work through those necessary vision roadblocks, to go through those pain points that we talk about and go through the RACA process over and over and over again. The only person that can really do that is you.
Mm-hmm.
What we have tried to establish is a thought partner and a sparring partner to help you go through that process so you're not alone. That's essential. That is what essential coaching is. But it is getting to those bare bones. And if you do the work, it can be extremely rewarding. And again, it's not trying to knock, and if I'm knocking anybody, I'm knocking us because we're the ones that set it up this way. But it's been probably the most eye-opening thing, because we will have conversations with coaches because they don't think we have a high profile enough client list. They don't think because we're not at this particular clinic, or we don't have this particular sponsor on our website, or we don't have certain things that everybody else perceives as success, that they're not going to get that here. And the point that you and I had to get to, which is the point that I think we would all hope that more people get to, is go down that other path. Go where everybody else is not. Everybody else is standing in line for the quick fix over here. Go to the window where there's nobody and see what's down there. And again, just in thinking about the 4 years and where we are and kind of where we might be in another 4 years, I think that's been extremely eye-opening for me. And it's something that we've kind of had to deal with. And I think we've been tested a few times, with opportunities to fast track some of these things, to sort of sell EC out a little bit and kind of go down another path. Hey, we could get you guys set up with this and you could make some money doing X. And it's like, no, but that's not our shtick, and I'm not saying that it's not tempting sometimes. You put 4 years into something and, you want to see it grow and you want to see it get this and that. But the text messages that we were getting today, sort of the happy birthday text message, and knowing the impact that you've made on people to create that exponential generational change. Generational change does not happen overnight.
Right.
That is a long game that you've got to be willing to play, but it's a long game that you've got to be willing to pay as well. And that's, again, not saying that we won't ever be tested again in some of those arenas, but I do think that that's something where you and I have been good for each other. Is even if one of us has an idea of, hey, well, what about this? And it's like, that's not necessarily what we said we were going to do. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I mean, I maybe it's just me that kind of sees it that way. But if you're out there looking to set up an LLC and make a bunch of money and do this and that, like, this really isn't the pathway for that. And I don't I don't know how many podcasts are out there that would be telling you that right now, and kind of admitting that. But I do think it's important because it lets you know, kind of, at least if you and I are having this conversation, like, it's why we decided to do this in the first place.
So I wrote down three things while you were talking. The first one is the perception of development. And these are all related. All right. So the first one is the perception of development. The second one is, as you were talking, what you were talking about is, to me, it mirrors how we would build a team or a program. The work is the work. That was the third thing I wrote down. The work is the work. And yeah, like I totally agree. Like, it's not the most sound business model in terms of, like, it's not even scalable, right? We have to be the ones that help people do whatever. There's only 24 hours in the day. We knew
That
all
was the first lesson.
right. We figured that out fairly quickly. However, when you and I think about, if we were to take over a program tomorrow, what are the things that need to be introduced right away? How we work, how we talk to each other, and how we do what we do on and off the court. Right? All essentially human component skills. The perception of development. So you said that phrase, and I'm glad you said that. This may be its own pod too, now that we think about it. But the perception of development, if we think about players currently, right? This new generation of kids. And really, it's a new generation of parents. It's not a new generation of kids. Kids have been the same forever. It is parents and adult influences. The perception of development is I'm going to go hire a trainer. I can see, quote, results right away. My kid has to do the work. I can write the check, so on and so forth. And there's a perception of development that's happening there. So then when things don't go the way that they think they should, that perception becomes shattered, and it must be somebody else's fault because I paid for this PDF, I paid for this training, it's all the same shit, right? That perception of development exists. What we offer, and what I think we are really good at, is poking holes in that perception of development and bringing people out of the matrix and saying, hey, stop. Think about these few things. Take two and call me in the morning. Oh, I never even thought about that. That's new to me. Holy crap. I've been doing this the whole time. We're not saying that any of this stuff is inherently wrong. You said this at the outset. It's not about finding the right way. Is there a better way? And I think that part pokes not just holes, but like blows up the perception of development. You spending hours watching these instructional DVDs, well, that's aging me a little bit. Streaming these instructional videos, that doesn't help you unless you've thought about how you're going to put that into practice for your team and for your kids. How are you going to communicate that to people? And that's literally all we've been after this entire time. How do we create real, relevant solutions tailored to people's individual situations? The only way to do that is to do the work. And that is the third phrase. The work is the work. There is no shortcut to this. And what's funny is that I sound right now like the coach speak version of the people who tell us no. Right? Trust the process. It takes what it takes. You can use every Sabanism in that you can find. It doesn't change the fact that you haven't done the work, or that there is more work to be done, because there is no finish line to any of this stuff. And the majority of the issues that you face as a coach, as a teacher, as an administrator, as whatever, we know this. It goes back to the relationships that you have with your people and the relationships they're willing to have with you. Right? But it's mirroring building the team and the program. We know, you and I know, that when we take over somewhere new, how to deploy all of this stuff in a strategic way that touches every single person differently. How many coaches can say the same thing? I'm not sure. I know our ECOGs probably can, because we've gone through the reps with them over and over and over and over again. But here's part of the reason I left college basketball to go coach high school basketball. I needed to see if our stuff still worked.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to know over the last year where we were on base and where we were off base. And could this be done with me as a head coach, coaching really, really good players in a fairly high pressure environment? And by and large, yes, it did work. And I think given more time, probably would have worked even better. So now it's sort of like the administrator in a school who spent 3 years in the classroom, then became an administrator and never went back to be in the classroom. How many coaches, and this is where I'm getting to this piece of the perception of development, how many coaches have left the level that they're at to go back down somewhere, or to go find a different level where maybe the understanding wasn't as high as where it is for them now? How many of them have taken on that challenge to say, hey, can what I do transcend whatever is put in front of me? Whether it's, public school where you can't choose your players, private school where you can recruit your players, but you still have to worry about finances and all of that stuff, college, youth. How many of them have put themselves in the challenge of having to try something new, or going back? I think for me, going from college to high school was just to see what the new generation was all about. I had been recruiting them for 4 years really successfully, but I wasn't a head coach. How do I make decisions with this new generation? Human component had to come first. How do I recruit in a different place? Am I recruiting parents, or am I recruiting kids? Right. So I think, in what you're saying, it is a wholly untenable business model, right? But it almost needs to be that, because I don't think what we do is also adoptable by everyone. I think you have to be really special to be able to put yourself in a situation where you're going to go learn, and where you're going to be introspective, and you're going to try to figure it out, and purposefully put yourself in a situation where you have to be a little bit vulnerable. And we talked about, like, why don't people go to therapy? Well, I think a lot of it is, and you said this as well, like, they don't want to go through the process of self-discovery. And also, like, it costs money to go to therapy, just to be asked a bunch of questions about yourself that you have to come to some sort of conclusion and figure it out. And I think that there's something to that, where what we offer, and this is, over the last year, like, testing a lot of these theories at just a different level to see if they work, and they absolutely do. I think the hardest part, and this is more the reflective piece of this now, is like, what we do is not for everybody. There are very few people that are willing to pay to be told that they have to do more thinking. But the ones who really want to be good at this are the ones who sign up for this and who become part of the EC fam, and they understand, these guys aren't experts, but they're really, really good at asking questions, and they're really, really good at asking and getting me to think. And in turn, I can do that with my players now. I can do that with my parents now. And so our way of doing what we do literally mirrors, I think, building a team and building a program. And it takes what it takes.
Yeah, I want to go back to the human component being undefeated, and where that has, for me, I would say out of the last, well, maybe 3 of our 4 years doing this, again, just with career changes and that sort of thing. So if you're familiar with our pyramid, human component at the bottom, character, program development, second layer, environmental design, third layer, and then the X's and O's, the content piece is at the very tippity top. And it's, again, not to say it's not important. It's helpful for a math teacher to know math. It's helpful for a basketball coach to understand basketball, but it's not the most important thing out there. And what's been interesting to me is I mean, literally changing industries and then roles and job titles within those industries, going from teaching high school to teaching junior high, different demographics, to moving to the Division 1 level, to working in the communications, to working in external ops, marketing, running a department, working at an executive level. The only thing that you can count on, the only thing that is consistent, is the bottom of the pyramid at that point. because the content and the X's and O's are so vastly different. Life science, US history, sports information, and brand engagement are all four totally different things. The job titles change, but the job itself stays the same. The job is people.
Mm-hmm.
The job is connection. The job is the human component. Being able to relate to people, have emotional agility, to have emotional intelligence, to be able to read a room, to be able to have a conversation, believe in somebody, show empathy, lead, the ability to be led. All of those things can remain consistent regardless of whatever room you're in, whether it be a classroom or whether it be a boardroom.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, those are two vastly different rooms with two vastly different groups of people. But the thing that they have in common is that they are full of people.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, people are people. And the human component remains undefeated,
Right.
regardless of whatever room you're in. And leaning into that, maybe that's the best thing that's happened to me over these 4 years is continuing to lean, whether I'm running the meeting or whether I'm the least important, smallest ranking person in that room. At the end of the day, it all ends up um, it all ends up being the same. And the work is the work. Leaders have to work really hard. Followers have to work really hard. Rotational leadership is a real thing. Leading from the back is a real thing. Being the first follower is a real thing. Leadership is influence is a real thing. Like the stuff that you hear talked about in any TED talk or leadership organization or book that you read or any of that stuff, like all of that stuff plays. But if you can't apply it, influence it, if you can't get the other people in the room to buy what you're selling, if you can't make the climate piece of this more important than the culture piece, then ultimately you're not going to get where you need to go, or your team or your organization is not going to get to where you need to go. And the best leaders and bosses that I've been around have understood the climate impact. They understand that it's not just the mission statement and the vision and the these are our value, this is what's on the wall. They're great at bringing that stuff off the wall, putting it to life. And they're not just focusing on 5 years down the road, they're focusing on the now, but they also understand the fact that the now is going to impact 5 years down the road. So there is a plan, there is alignment towards that plan, but we're actually working on that plan today. Because if the people in that room are not buying what you're selling, then you're not really selling anything at all. The only way you can truly sell something is if somebody's actually buying it. And the way that I think we've seen that and the people that we've talked to and the people that we've worked with is that the human component is the thing. Because you can change. I mean, you, not to steal this example, but I mean, you said it in the pre-show, like, hey, if we just put this play in this year, like you're the other essential coaching guy. You're the human component guy. Like you invented the term. And even you at some point in the middle of the season is going, okay, we really need to run this. Because if we can run this, that's going to fix this, and you still get wrapped up into it. And no matter how many times how many reps, how many times you go down it, like you still going to struggle with that at times. But that's to me where the support system comes in, because you really, I'm not going to say you can't, but you're going to have a really, really, really hard time doing this if you're doing it on your own. Really hard time. Hey,
I forgot how to use Zoom.
75 episodes in 4 years.
Yeah, man. It's like 4 years ago, we couldn't use Zoom either. Um, no, I was saying as I was on mute, like I didn't, you know, I didn't have to do it by myself, but you bring up the putting in motion week. So I told you that story in the pre-show. And I was really lucky to have an assistant coach, I think probably for the first time. Well, I wouldn't say the first time, but certainly after not being a head coach for 4 years, having an assistant coach who just was so aligned to the vision. And yeah, I can't say enough good things about Amy and how she like she just gets it, right? And I think for her being, in her day job, right, being a psychologist and all of that, like she just understands the human component element of it. And I remember, and I'm not, the human component element of it sounds very like reductive. It's not an element. It is all of it. But we still needed to run stuff, right? Like you got to run something. You got to play basketball. And I remember like, you know, printing out motion week for our kids and like it, I was just in like it's a pass and two screens, right? And like in the way that we taught it, in the way that we broke it down for our kids, we never ran it. We couldn't. We legitimately could not run it. And it wasn't the kids' fault. It was that it became a distraction from us wanting to play our way. And it was such a departure from just teaching them to play through concepts and, playing out of ball screens, playing out of gets that like anything that was remotely structured beyond that required so much more effort. And that was a human component conversation, just like anything else. Of like, hey, we got to understand we've set the table for us to play this way. Anything that's a departure from that is going to require way more effort and way more reps and way more all of this. And in my mind, I was like, we have some pretty high level, like highly skilled players here. Maybe we could put some of these basic things in and see if we can get some kids some shots in spots that they need them and things like that. Um, and we, I think we might have put in like 3 out of bounds plays and 1 sideline out of bounds, and that was it for the year. Right. And like that level of simplicity was really, really nice. But I'm not sure that I did a good enough job preparing some of our kids to go off to college too, where they're going to end up running 67 different sets and 85 different out of bounds plays and so on and so forth. Right. So I think, that is just an example of like, you got to know your people and know your personnel and be able to give them what they can handle, but also be authentic enough to yourself to say, hey, no, you can handle more and we're going to do it this way. And even if we never run this, I want you to be familiar with this concept. Like, I think both of those things can exist. But that was a really hard lesson for me to learn because, for the 4 years prior to that I had been a head coach, I think we ran a total of 2 set plays in 4 years. And here I am trying to put in 4 or 5 different quick hitters because our offense became stagnant partway through the season. Can you imagine an Asim Rastogi offense being stagnant? I can't, but it happened, right? We needed some different entries to get us to the same end game. And I don't know, I feel like I whiffed on that a little bit, but I also needed to understand my humans better, I think.
I think that last line is that's the work being the work.
Mm-hmm.
26-year-old Asim would have never come to that conclusion.
Nope.
It would have been that set was the wrong set. Let's try this one.
Mm-hmm.
And continuing to spin the hamster wheel instead of it being okay, maybe it's a me issue, maybe it's a them, maybe it's a communication issue, maybe it's some other, you know, issue there, but the stuff is not the stuff. And I kind of joked about some of this stuff on Twitter during the tournament about, whatever double digit coach, double digit seed upsets a top seed, like get ready to see their stuff plastered all over Twitter because you too can be Oakland.
Right.
Yeah.
But you don't
You
have Jack goalkeepers. You can be
no, no. And even if you did, you wouldn't let him shoot that way anyway.
nope.
Like, let's be real. 90 fake statistic, 90% of the coaches in the country would have never allowed one kid to shoot 23s in a game, even if it meant knocking off somebody, Calipari or whatever. But I tongue in cheek joking, but like then we saw it, like it happened. And then, 2 weeks later, it goes by, and now nobody cares about Oakland anymore. Now it's got, it's all about Nate Oates and Dan Hurley, and they were high school coach. And I think there's merit and value to them being high school coaches. I mean, you and I get on here, we've talked all the time. Like some of the best coaches we know are junior high coaches. They're high
Mhm.
school coaches. There are because they are having to do said work to get the humans to understand. Whereas as you matriculate up in levels, it becomes less and less about that. And not that it should become less and less about that. But, there's obviously a lot of different variables at play now in today's world. And you can't just blame the transfer portal on relationships and things like that. It's much more complex than that. But even 5 years ago, I think some of that stuff rang true. And if
Mhm.
somebody transferred, it's because they weren't playing or they didn't like their coach or whatever the case may be. And there's a much more transactional nature at that level. So if you can take somebody who can teach, 12-year-olds geometry in a room full of people who don't care about geometry, like that person's special
Mhm.
because then I can teach you something that you're actually interested in, like basketball or baseball or hockey or football or something like that. Like that to me is what is amazing about great educators and classroom teachers. And our guy Brian, he makes this point a lot, coaching is teaching and teaching is coaching. It's like, no, not really. Like coaches get to deal with kids who want to be there.
Mhm.
Teachers deal with kids who have to be there and
Mhm.
they have to sit in a room and teach them things that they have no interest in whatsoever. They don't want to be there. They don't think they're ever going to have to use it. And those are the people that have to convince those kids to show up every day, learn something and apply it to what might be there in life. Your
Mhm.
football kids want to be there on some level. They at least did, at some point. Like your gymnastics kids want to be there. Your kids that are in band want to play music. Like you already get half the battle is won because you're already dealing with people who are walking in freely. And so it does not surprise me at all to see former high school coaches having success on that kind of level because there's no doubt in my mind most of the development they got was probably in the classroom
Mhm.
and having to coach at that level. Now, again, generalizing, you got to handle the college business and the world and all that. There's obviously skill sets and nuance and context, all those things, but it does not shock me at all that somebody can come from the quote unquote lower level and have success at a higher level. I'd be more shocked if people at a quote unquote higher level had success at a lower level because so much more of that human component's at play.
That would be the ultimate experiment, right? To take like John Calipari, and I think we've talked about this before. Take a guy like John Calipari and put him at like Cedar Creek High School,
But yeah,
right?
take John Calipari and stick him at Russian Middle School in Bossier City
Mm-hmm.
and be like, all right,
High School.
go undefeated.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, no, I know it. And so that's why, like, when you think about like Mark Pope, right? There was all this talk about Mark Pope. You know what Mark Pope's really good at? Getting people to trust him
yeah.
and leading people, right? Like he lit up Provo, freaking Utah. That place was sold out. People are going nuts for BYU basketball. And Mark Pope is on the mic, like getting them going. John Calipari didn't even call the Hogs, man. You know what I mean? So I just think that there's something to be said for that, where like if you are levels are irrelevant, we know that, but I think there is something to be said for the high school coach who can go take over a college program and recruit everyone every day because that's just what they do, right? Like you have to. I'm sure you dealt with this as a teacher. You had 30 plus kids in your class, right? You just alluded to it. How do you teach 30 plus kids and move them all? You don't do that by just delivering the content and being really, really good at the X's and O's stuff. You got to be able to move them all and have a way to measure that and a way to, have operationalized variables, all of this stuff. But it comes back to making sure those people know, hey, if you put in the work, we will be able to move you. And I think that is, my culminating thought, at least based on what we've talked about today and just understanding the last year, but really the last 4 years. We will help move you where you want to go if you're willing to take the resources and do the work. And that's the equity part of this conversation. Not everybody needs the same thing. But we got something for everybody because it's tailored, it's real, it's relevant. And if you're willing to take it and do the work, some really, really good things can happen for you.